Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Vince, and this evening I want to discuss what's going on at the Beverly YMCA in the area of STEM education for the students. And we have with us Ann Curry, and your full title is?
STEM Integration Specialist.
STEM Integration Specialist. So how long have you been doing it?
I've been with the Y for about 17 years. The STEM integration program has been full blown for about 5 years, and I did previously work with the after school doing curriculum integration, but now I focus primarily on STEM.
Well, when you say STEM education, what kind of grade levels are you talking about? Age levels?
We actually have an initiative to be able to bring STEM education from preschool to 8th grade at the YMCA. Our preschool classes have the ability to borrow equipment from the STEM lab. The teachers can be trained on it, and they have an opportunity to teach some of the youngest children some great simplistic STEM skills, age appropriately, obviously.
Well, when you talk about preschool, where's the preschool?
The preschool is actually, it's childcare located right at the Greater Beverly YMCA, within our Academic Achievement Center and also our main building. So there's many classes. However, the preschool, we really focus on just what's called the KR, which is kindergarten readiness class, and these children are 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. And we have some wonderful staff who are very motivated to give kids STEM experiences, whether it's outside, whether it's using some of the simple technology that we offer them to borrow from the STEM lab. And it really gives them, it's a nice head start to be comfortable with different types of STEM equipment, which is a very important aspect of STEM education, is comfort.
What kind of equipment do they have in this?
Well, in the STEM lab, we really have enough equipment to really be able to look at STEM education at such a large spectrum in all the different disciplines. We have huge amounts of what's called Kitty Connects and Connects, and we have Legos, we have digital microscopes, we have what's called light stacks, which are Legos that actually light up. So these are the simple ones that the younger children would borrow.
Yeah. Well, what would they do with them?
They would do a lot of things. A good example is that we have many silicon molds that have all different types of science creatures in them. We have ones that are bugs and insects. We have ones that are all different types of sea life. And the kids can use the digital microscope with guidance from their teacher naturally. They're young. Yeah. And they can actually zoom in up to 480% and take a really close look at the different parts of the organism. And it really gives them an idea of the small parts and what these little figures look like. And then they can take some of this simple information that they can glean from looking at the digital microscope, and then they can bring it to compare and contrast organisms or simply animals. I mean, I think a lot of times we just simplify the terminology to make it age appropriate.
So before we get too deep into this thing, what's STEM?
STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And quite often it's called STEAM, S-T-E-A-M, Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Math. We focus on STEAM because we really are looking at skills within the science and technology realm. We do art, but the art we do isn't inclusive to the art. Art is such a large topic, and it has there's so much to learn in art that we can't really say we teach art as much as we just use it as a tool to help kids get there. So being invested in STEAM or having an initiative in STEAM is just something that's incredibly necessary. The Y recognized that a long time ago. And we have the ability to bring materials and equipment out to the after schools. We run classes within the Y, and we run girls in science programs. So we're really trying to hit all what would be considered key points.
Again? Girls in
Science. It's called STEM Horizons.
Okay.
Sorry.
What's Girls in Science all about?
STEM Horizons is, I think, one of the best programs that we have. All our programs are wonderful, but this particular one really hits home. What we had to do is take a really serious look at how we can help girls in science. If you look at the data when it comes to girls in science, it's very the numbers of girls that are going into science is increasing. However, the amount of children or girls that actually become part of the workforce, it's very inequitable. There's a giant inequity. There's a pay inequity for females in science, but there's also just a being there inequity. Females represent only about 28% of most companies. The educational aspect is changing, and it's changing very quickly. Just recently, Northeastern did a wonderful article for the first year ever. The number of females in their education for engineering is higher than the number of males.
Yeah.
And that's huge. I mean, in 1970, about 8% of females went into engineering, and most companies had about 2 to 3% engineers in their companies. So that's changing, and we're seeing a lot of things changing for women in science. And there's an awful lot of reasons why it's important to look at girls in science and what it means for them to be comfortable in these different fields. I listened to this wonderful podcast with MIT graduate students, all females, and they talked about how they didn't feel excluded, but they didn't feel included. So they were reflecting on their experience as young girls with a desire to learn about science and a desire to be part of the scientific community. And they would find activities and find classes that they could take. And they would historically be the only female in the room. And they got over that hump. They felt that all the boys in the class were respectful of their ideas, were respectful of their theories, were willing to let them participate. So they did feel included in that sense. But there was a social aspect that's so important for people to understand, that the girls still want to be girls. And so these boys had, their own groups. They did things like hung around in sweatpants and played video games at night or after school. And the girls weren't included in that, mainly because that wasn't their interest. So during the class, they felt like they belonged, but they didn't feel like they were part of a group, because the boys just had different interests. Yeah. And that's something important to understand, why it's necessary to have girls solely together as a group, because they need to have outside interests. They need to form a community. It needs to be above a desire to be part of scientific inquiry.
So basically, we're getting into a situation where the boys will be boys,
Exactly.
the girls will be girls.
Exactly.
And their interests, even though they have a common interest in science, their interests in other things are grossly different.
Grossly different. And girls have a tendency to be a little bit more mature. They want to talk about fashion. They want to talk about the boys that are interested in. And that's not going to happen outside of the realm with this group of boys that they do science with. Fortunately, so many of the young girls were willing to just be okay with it and stick with it. But it really is, especially in middle school, especially, say, 5th to 8th grade, a reason for a lot of girls to just stray from science education outside of, the regular school day.
Well, you get into a situation, I guess, that I was reading up on some stuff, thinking about this discussion, and way back when, there used to be this phrase, the tomboys, and girls that were interested in boys' kinds of things were labeled tomboys, because that was their attitude towards sports, what was going on in school, and a lot of these things. And, excuse me, what you're sort of implying is that you're getting away from having to be a tomboy to get interested in science. Any old girl can get interested in science, and really you're providing a program geared to them. And some of the pictures you sent me, was really impressed with all these girls doing things with, I don't know what these toys were they were playing with, but
I'd like to talk about that, but I'd like to also just go back and talk a little bit more about why it's necessary to have a Girls in Science program. Mm-hmm. There is something that's called the Massachusetts STEM Summit, where colleagues, manufacturers, different companies, community advocates get together and discuss science and talk about what's important in science. And I went to one of the lectures that was on community engagement. And there was a group out of Springfield, Massachusetts, who had brought in elementary school teachers and said to them, with a group of engineers and scientists around the table and the elementary school teachers. What can we do to help you to promote science? And the teachers said something that just had a profound effect on my thinking towards teaching science, especially to young children. They said, we understand the scientific method, we understand the engineering design process, but we don't really know what you do. We don't know what an engineer actually does. What does their day-to-day look like? Yeah. And if we could understand that better, we then could teach the children better. And that just really struck me. And not only for educators to improve what they offer in the classroom, but also for children in general. I think a lot of kids think, I want to go into science, I want to be an engineer, and then they get to a certain point in their academic career and it gets incredibly challenging, and I think they're a little shocked by what's really involved to be high performing or even just performing in science and engineering. So I thought, this is something that I need to do. I need to make community connections. Living in Beverly, living on the North Shore, just living in Massachusetts, there's so many companies that we can tap into and get these engineers and scientists and technologists to come and talk to children. We can take field trips to some of their facilities. Yeah. And so that has really been the primary focus of the STEM Horizons program. We bring in scientists and engineers, all female, for our female group. And they discuss their college to career path. They discuss the equipment that they use. They discuss the processes they use. But they also, because it's a young group of girls and we want them to make connections to these women, they talk about their regular life, what they're interested in. And they get to see that some of them are dancers and some of them are hikers and some of them have climbed huge mountains. And there's a way to connect that's beyond just the science, and it's so important. So they get an opportunity to know a little bit about these scientists, understand what a college to career path can look like in engineering or science. And then the girls engage in hands-on experience that's loosely based on their particular discipline. It's been incredibly successful. All the children, all the families that have been involved in it have been so happy. And we just have been so fortunate to have so many companies be willing to send their staff, their engineers, their doctors out to us. We've had people from BU School of Medicine, Framingham Heart Study, which longitudinally is the biggest and most important heart study that is done in the world. We get their cell culture scientists to come in. We have engineers from just so many different places. We go to Abiomed. We actually have a field trip tomorrow to Abiomed. And we will meet with many female scientists and engineers, and they'll have an opportunity to tour the facilities, to use some of the equipment. It's fantastic. They suit the girls up in PPE, and they're head to toe. They get to go into a semi-clean room and work with some of the equipment. So these experiences, all led by female scientists and engineers, are incredibly impactful. The girls are just so happy to be part of the program, as the parents are. Yeah. And I'm delighted to lead something like this. We had something that made me, or someone that made me just especially proud to be part of the program, and I thought it was wonderful for the young girls and for the city of Beverly. For the first time, we had a Beverly High School graduate present in our program. Maeve Deneen, who just graduated from college. She's in her first year of her first job. And
what does she do?
She's an engineer. She works in water filtration and water management programs. Okay. And she works for Weston and Sampson. And so here she is, incredibly young, first time navigating a job, in the scientific community as an engineer. And she met with the girls, and there was just such a lovely connection. It was really fantastic. And I was just so happy for the girls to see someone, fresh out of college, just having an opportunity to be part of the scientific community and really contributing a lot to her company and her job, and her company was delighted for her to be part of it.
I can remember when I was teaching science and math after I retired, and got two good connections. One was with Bates Lab. Used to take my 8th grade physical science class over there. And the program was led by a female who was the director. At the time, she was the director of all instrumentation. And used to get the kids to walk around see all the big stuff. And also went to New England Biolabs when they were, it used to be right behind the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And the other program, excuse me, was essentially playing with the toys, taking a tour. And I always remember the kids did not like to go into the room where they were breeding these different organic molecules because it stunk to high heaven. But hey, that's the real world. It was,
Right, exactly.
there was 3 ladies there who did not start with a scientific background, but they were making molecules, which was what New England Biolabs does.
Well, cell culture, yes.
Yeah, and they learned how to do it. And I think one of the girls in one of my classes eventually graduated from MIT. So
Exciting. So
something takes.
I think that, and it's well known in all the literature, that having female role models in science and engineering is the most important thing for young women to feel that they can be part of
Well,
it,
that's
that,
the
that
other-
there's a place at the table for them. They need to see that. They need to meet these women. They need to understand how engaging and how rewarding their jobs are.
Well, this is the thing that's starting to show up an awful lot of how much science that has been going on, or engineering or technology, was instigated or developed by a female. And everybody thinks of Madame Curie. Okay.
Sure.
Interesting article showed up this morning. Her notebooks are still radioactive from long, long ago. Eventually they killed her, but that's the other side effect of it. But I guess she was an admiral in the Navy who used to work on the original computers. And I remember seeing a lecture, she used to walk in with a piece of wire this long, and this is a nanosecond. You know, that kind of stuff that, brings it down to reality. Okay, that's what it is, And the other one that's famous is Hedy Lamarr,
Yes.
famous movie actress. She invented the frequency switching that makes computers and cell phones work. And it was developed in World War II. And they used it on the torpedoes, the radioactive torpedoes, so they could frequency switch the signal so
She was a brilliant
the enemy
woman.
couldn't intercept them. So, I mean, these stories are slowly coming out, and oh yeah, wow, I never knew that. This is the kind of reaction I think that a lot of people are getting, that there's a lot going on that is not male-oriented. You don't have to be a super geek to get into some of these fields.
Absolutely, and that's a really important idea and concept to address both to children and in the public, or in an opportunity forum like this. If you look at the different type of education levels, where different type of people who work as engineers of science, whether they're in cell culture or bioinformatics, there's so many different levels to enter. And there's so many wonderful programs out there that are far shorter than a PhD. I think a lot of times children think, or parents think, you need to have a PhD to be successful in science. There's so many opportunities that are much before that. There's both UMass and BU and North Shore Community College offer certificates, short plans, 9 months, 2 years, to be able to have a degree, and then you're able to work as an assistant technician in a cell culture lab, or you're able to work as a technician in bioinformatics. And of course, there's a need for people that have BSs and people that have PhDs and masters. But there's so much opportunity out there for people to start in the scientific community with a smaller amount of education, and then to be able to grow. And so many companies, when they get these assistant technicians, they really motivate them and help them to understand, well, why don't you go back to school? Why don't you get the BS? Why don't you get the master's and the PhD? I think a lot of children are overwhelmed that, I have to be the straight A student, I have to be amazing at math, I have to be amazing at science, or I can't go into that field. If you are motivated in math and you are motivated in science, you can get there.
Yeah.
And it's a real important lesson.
My take on it is right now, biotech is the big field, more so than when I was
It's
going
changing
through school.
as we speak. It's an incredible field.
And the thing that would hold me back in biotech is I was never good at Latin. I used to be an altar boy, and I still can't keep the Latin straight.
I don't think that's as important as it has been.
I got into this situation not too long ago. I was talking to a nurse practitioner, and she said, "What medications you taking?" I'm looking at these bottles, and what on earth is that? And try to pronounce it, and you get into a discussion with the doctor. Oh yeah, you got a problem with the medulla. Where's the medulla?
Right.
So it's a language situation. I think that certain skills you have to be able to manage some of this stuff. But I think, like you said, the idea of getting your feet wet,
Absolutely.
trying it, just get into something. And one of the things that caught my eye was when the city did the Plan Beverly. One of the comments they had in there was that something like 90% of the people who work in Beverly work in some sort of medical-related field. So you get to this point of saying, hey, that's the local business. So if you want to stay local, that's the background you've got to develop. And like you say, there are certificate programs, 2 years at a community college or a year. I've met a bunch of guys at the Y who are nursing students at North Shore Community College. And you get into it, and well, gee, that ain't so bad. Maybe I'll become a nurse practitioner.
Exactly. And this happens to a lot of people. It happens to MITs become nurses, and EMT would become a nurse, or then maybe they become a nurse practitioner. A nurse practitioner may become a doctor. But I think it's so important that engaging children at a level when they're young that they're comfortable with and building those skills. The governor's STEM initiative, which started many, many years ago, had just incredibly simple goals. It was to increase children's awareness of science occupations, increase children's interest in STEM fields, and to increase their comfort level with STEM skills. And sort of that last one is really what we hold on to in the STEM department at the Y. And we help kids be introduced to some really simplistic skills, and some of them even mirror what's done in the professional world using actually equipment, whether it's a pipetting system, whether it's using microscopes or digital microscopes, but helping kids to be incredibly comfortable with this. The kids have absolutely no problem with the technology. That's just not an issue.
I go shopping.
They
with my
live
wife.
with it. It's daily to them.
And going around the market, and there's this kid that can't be much more than 3 or 4 years old, sitting in the carriage with some sort of
device and completely
device,
understanding how to use it.
playing away with it.
Exactly.
So
and they know how to get in, they know how to access the programs, they understand how to change the programs. So when you look at something like an incredibly growing and important field is naturally coding. Every kid needs to do a little bit of coding.
Yeah.
They need to be introduced to it. They need to use it in varied ways. We have a robotics program at the Y.
Yeah.
We have what's called ROOT, which is iRobot's educational program. And it's wonderful. And the reason why, it's wonderful in many aspects, but the kids walk in ready to dive in. They're not intimidated. They don't look at the screen to where I begin. They look at the screen like, I'm going to dive in, and I might make a mistake, but then I'm just going to try again.
Well, that's the whole idea.
It's amazing. And once again, talking about what's so good about this particular program, is it starts out what's called graphic drop and drag. So it's all pictorials. It's just pulling pictures to write code. And each picture tells a story, whether it is to draw, to do music, to light up, to move a certain distance, or to change your direction by degrees. And this is all pictorial. So the really young kids can do this. Kids can do this.
When you say young, how old is it?
I think that the program actually says it can work as young as preschool. We haven't done it with kids under second grade.
Okay.
So we have second and third graders that are mastering this first level. But then it also has a second level, which is a combination between the graphics and text coding. And then a third level, which is all text coding. So any child that comes into any of our coding programs or robotics programs has the ability to sort of move at their own level. So I could have 3 different groups of kids working, and we could have this group's using straight pictorial, so 11-1, this group's using the combination, and the other group, day one was just, I get it, it flew right to level 3. And I'll be honest, that when this was first proposed that we should do something like this, I was a little hesitant, a little bit of a old dog, new tricks, and I was surprised how easy it was for me to learn.
One of the, I think, the major problems, I think, is you go into school and you're taught to do everything right, never make a mistake.
That doesn't work in science.
No, it's like science.
It's actually it's the exact opposite of what a science is.
One of the descriptions that I used to use of engineering is you make it and break it and make it and break it, and when it stops breaking, you throw the drawings over the wall and manufacture it.
Exactly.
And I think this is the concept, is you really don't know what you're doing in science in a lot of cases, and the whole trick of the game is, can I learn something? And you learn by making mistakes. And
Absolutely.
Well, that ain't the way to do it.
Right. One of my favorite expressions, and I have it up on my wall, and at the beginning of every class I point at it and say, take a good look at this, and we're going to talk about what this means. And it says, if you get it right the first time, you're lucky. If you get it right the second time, you're fortunate. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And that means there's been a learning process.
Yeah.
The first time, if you get it right, you didn't have an opportunity to find those mistakes and take a better look at whatever the process is that you're part of. And then when you do have mistakes, you learn. And every time you learn, it just really goes out in many directions on how you can have a better understanding for the concept.
And the other thing I think is, how do you encourage the kids to ask questions?
I think that there are, I think it's so important to have, in the case of the STEM room, to have a climate that's as relaxed as possible. I mean, I actually think that Massachusetts and Beverly schools, all schools within the North Shore, statistically are doing amazing work in science. I mean, that's seen, the data is there. We know that Massachusetts has the highest STEM scores. We compete internationally when it comes to STEM scores. So our local schools and our state are doing an amazing job. But they still are constrained by a classroom that has to be formal and just has so many other barriers. But in the STEM room, we really try to build a climate that's incredibly relaxed, that there's an opportunity for when there's a mistake, that it's okay to get up, walk away, go back, calm down. And these even fall under social emotional skills. I mean, you really have to have strong social emotional skills to be a scientist. You can't let frustration ruin your work. You can't walk away or smack something down every time something goes wrong. But that's a natural reaction for a young kid.
Well, the other
This
point,
Lego didn't work.
the other point was made, we had interviewing candidates for school committee a year or so ago, and one of them said, well, one of the problems I have when I hire some students as interns is they get a cell phone call in the middle of an experiment. They put the experiment down and go play with the cell phone. So one of the ingredients that has to be, I think, focused on is, hey, you're doing a task, and you stay on target. And don't get distracted into something else, because that's when you lose it. And all of a sudden, what the hell happened here? And, geez, I don't know.
Yeah, cell phones, I think, are going to always be an issue in education, and every teacher handles that in a different way by just not allowing them. But I think as adults, we have to model that, and I think that's incredibly important. You know, when we're at a task at hand, if something's important, our cell phone is away or needs to be away. And I think that children have such, children, teenagers, 20-something, 30-something, they're so comfortable with their cell phone, they think it's just perfectly fine to respond to a text in the middle of a meeting. And you see that everywhere. But in the classroom, it's different, and that's a struggle in education.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have that struggle in the STEM room because we just don't allow them. Except we do run a technology course, which a technology and engineering and gaming camp, which we do allow cell phones, but that's a whole other deal.
Believe it or not, we've had 30 minutes of fun. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching us this evening. And as usual, if you've got some comments you would like to make, the same, different, or contrary, you'll notice at the end of the credits is my email address. Send me an email and we can make room for you at the table. And Ann, thank you very much for stopping by.
Thank you. It was a
appreciate it.
delightful conversation. Thank you.